resistance.
What's up, everyone? This is the Tin Man with the Worldwide Resistance Network. If you are watching this, you are the resistance. And welcome to Tin Man TV. Yes, everyone, this is Tin Man TV. I, of course, am your host, the Tin Man, and this is the infamous Meth Monster Blue and all that jazz, because we are not funded by the corporate machine. We are of the people, by the people, for the people. So if you like this broadcast, by all means, share the live feeds. Follow us on our various social medias, X, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, all at Real TWWN. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube, as well as that notification bell to be notified anytime we go live, and also just to fuck up their algorithm, because Google fucking sucks. And on that note, I do want to point out that is the reason we didn't do a podcast last night, because there was a bunch of software that was required by Google in order to do a gaming live stream, which we generally do not do, but we wanted to screw with AI. We wanted to have a little bit of fun, but Google software was just not wanting to install last night, and it was a nightmare and a half. So we will eventually try that again, maybe next week, after I've got the bugs and everything sorted out, but that was a major clusterfuck, and that is why we didn't wind up going live last night with another roundtable. But moving forward, again, we have no problems with Tin Man TV and the roundtable themselves directly. So by all means, again, share the live feeds, follow us on our various social medias, and check out our online store at Real TWWN. Tons of great new merchandise. Just an update. I promised this a few days ago, and I delivered, as I always do. In fact, I will just bring it up and show you. Where is it? There we go. Our No Kings protest shirts are now on sale for $21.99, and white shirts are $19.99. That is the lowest possible price that we could possibly give. So with the No Kings protest coming up, get your No String shirt as a counter protest and have those delivered to you just in time for the No Kings protests in March. Take a stand and expose this lie for exactly what it is, which is a government psyops funded by George Soros and his group, and that you are sick of government politicians and globalist lackeys who think they're gods running our country and running the world, for that matter. So get your No Kings shirts. We also have the ice shirts and our varying other shirts. Oh, Anonymous, Where Art Thou? Toilet Paper USA, Spam Bundy, and so forth, along with tons of other great merchandise. Feel free to check all that out at realtwwn.printify.me. And on that note, let's just go ahead and dive right into it, ladies and gentlemen. Comments are now enabled, so feel free to join in the conversation. Again, this is Tin Man TV. Tin Man TV and The Roundtable are the only political podcasts that I am presently aware of that include you in the conversation. So if you have any thoughts, opinions, or information, please, by all means, share it in the comment and become a part of the conversation. Now, moving into the topics at hand. The government shutdown has ended, which is very interesting because with everything that was going on with the Epstein files drop by the DOJ and everything that happened there, how many of us can honestly say that we even knew that a government shutdown had happened? I mean, I knew, and most people probably did know, but in the back of the mind, like it was virtually non-existent to all of us because of everything that else was going on. So when the news breaks that the government shutdown had ended, I was just kind of like, oh yeah, that happened. So, but what does the government shutdown mean? And more specifically, what does it mean now the government shutdown has ended and a deal has been reached? Well, let's go ahead and dive right into that. Government shutdown ends as House approves Trump's deal with Democrats. Now, what the hell does that mean exactly? The partial government shutdown, I think they meant, that began on Saturday is over. The House of Representatives voted to pass a funding deal struck by President Donald Trump and Senate Democrats on Tuesday in a bipartisan vote that came shortly after the body adopted the rule to allow a vote on the package. The vote on the rule, which concluded Tuesday afternoon, came in at 217 to 215. One Republican rep, Thomas Massey, and every Democrat voted against the rule. Again, not surprised with Thomas Massey. While the rest of the GOP caucus voted in favor of it. By contrast, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 defectors on both sides of the aisles when the time came to vote on the legislation itself. Now, what we want to know is what happened. Since last week, White House struck a deal to continue funding DHS at current levels for 2 weeks to allow for further negotiations, and the Senate passed a legislation package to act on that agreement on Friday. Now, the House has done the same at present, urging and working hard with Speaker Johnson to get the current funding deal, which passed in the Senate last week. Though the House and to my desk, where I will sign it into law immediately, wrote Trump in Truth Social Post on Monday. We need to get the government open, and I hope all Republicans and Democrats will join me in supporting this bill. Okay, well, the Democrats are never going to support anything you do, Trump. You could cure cancer, they'd have a shit fit about it. But I digress. Okay. So there's also been other issues that came up after the fact. In fact, last night there was actually an article that was posted on Yahoo News, and I wake up this morning to all this nonsense. But I'm going to just go ahead and show this. Prospects for ICE deal sour on Capitol Hill as shutdown deadline nears for critical agency. Again, this was last night at 11 p.m. So, I mean, the deal had already been made. Everything was voted on, but then things got sour. For a fleeting moment in Washington, top Democrats believed last week they could reach a deal with the GOP to set new limits for President Trump's nationwide immigration enforcement. Again, it's not Trump's. It's something that has existed since 2003, since the Bush administration. Okay, this is the government's ICE, not Trump's ICE. Cut the shit, guys. Okay, setting new limits on immigration enforcement after federal agents killed 2 U.S. citizens in Minnesota. The hope is mostly gone inside the U.S. Capitol. Congress pushes for a bipartisan deal to scale back federal immigration officers' powers is now in doubt, with Speaker Mike Johnson ruling out 2 of Democrats' biggest demands after the deaths of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. Johnson is among many Republicans who are refusing Democrats' demands to stop searches without judicial warrants and unmask officers in public, blah, blah, blah. Again, we've discussed this many times now. There's a lot of issues with that. And I'm going to go ahead and just touch on that. Okay? You don't need a warrant. ICE does not need a warrant. They have what is commonly referred to as a judicial order. Okay? They have court orders from the judge. Okay? They don't need warrants. They have court orders, which is stronger than a warrant. Okay? That's point number 1. Okay? And the difference is in terms of legalities and strength. They want ICE to have a weaker set of orders, which is dumb. Okay? The judge signs the court order, says, go arrest this person. Okay? A court order, or not a court order, but a... Damn, it's just so damn stupid. A warrant is different and is a lot weaker than a judge's order. Okay? Okay. And it's very direct. A court order is very direct, whereas a warrant is much broader and looser in its terms, where again, as a judge's order is very direct, on point, and specific. So the argument that Democrats are making that we want court orders is ridiculous. Okay, they're just trying to make legalities more subjective, which would in turn make things a lot harder on the organization. And now, Scott Bessent didn't hold back on Maxine Waters when addressing these issues regarding ICE in our country, 10 to 20 million new people demanding housing and whatnot, which is what stemmed this whole damn issue. So we're just going to go ahead and cut to that real quick here on X.
I believe the ranking member does not understand the definition of generalized inflation versus one-time price increases. I would also note that housing, especially for working Americans, a Wharton study has shown that the mass unfettered immigration, adding 10 to 20 million new people demanding housing, Congresswoman, is what caused a great deal of housing inflation for working Americans. So you and the Biden administration should be ashamed.
Which is also, which is,
Believe the rank.
Yeah. Now, that's kind of a side issue, but is not without warrant. That's a lot of what stemmed this push for immigration and immigration reform. Okay, the Biden administration all but dissolved the agency, despite his predecessor, Obama, going gung-ho with it and going completely apeshit with it. In fact, I believe Obama holds the record for the most deportations by a U.S. president in modern history. So, the whole argument is Democrats just don't want ICE to exist. They don't want ICE to exist because they're getting rid of the voters. It's the same reason why they're opposed to the SAFE Act, which would require voter ID and very strict regulations on verifying that you are a U.S. citizen and have the right to vote in this country. Okay? That's what it's all about. They don't give a shit about these migrants. It's about getting them to vote Democrat and getting them on those and bribing them with all these welfare programs and incentives that the Democrats are in turn taking huge cuts of in welfare fraud, which is exactly what that is. Again, things that have all been investigated and are being investigated. Now, we all know about the John Podesta plan and all that. Hold on. But before I jump into that, okay, so I am on point. Okay. I thought I got ahead of myself there for a second. I'm not perfect. We all know about the John Podesta plan, and the reason these people are actually protesting is because they're paid off by Soros, trying to get themselves hurt or killed in order to get the George Floyd they need to start a civil war, which is not so much a civil war, but is more of the final stages in a color revolution. Now, we can get into the dynamics of all that and how a civil war would play out, but here's the thing. Jones reports on his thing, he's live right now. Borders are hoping to withdraw 700 agents from Minnesota as counties begin unprecedented cooperation with ICE, which is a good thing. I'll probably post articles from that and tidbits from that later on from X on our X account at Real TWWRN. We can just address that as information comes out. I'm not going to dive too much into that right now because, one, things are still in the beginning stages. We don't have the full scope of how things are going to play out or how people are going to react. We don't know how the George Soros protesters are going to play ball. We don't know how the Democrat elects in those areas are going to respond and if they're going to play ball. I mean, there's going to be a lot to unpack here and just watch and see what happens once the smoke clears. But here's what I'm getting at. We all understand that we have this flip-flop with these elected officials, playing nice with Trump and then doing whatever they want. The same with Zelensky. Okay, Trump, I'll take deal. Hey, Ukraine, I'll take deal. Hey, you give me more cocaine now? It's the same goddamn thing. And so it's going to be interesting to see how things play out because here's something that not a lot of people are talking about. In fact, I don't think anybody's really made this point. Everybody focuses on the John Podesta plan as the main focus as to why these protests or agitators are out there. You know, they're trying to get themselves killed, blah, blah, blah. Spark the Civil War, all that fun shit. But here's something that nobody is talking about. And I didn't even think about this till this morning when I saw these articles. And then it just clicked and it made perfect fucking sense. It's not just about getting this Civil War. You look at everything with the Epstein files and the DOJ's investigation into the voter fraud and this fraud in Minnesota and so on and so forth. But you look at all these arrests and these issues with ICE, that all requires DOJ investigation. Now, a lot of people are demanding that we want prosecutions regarding the Epstein files and the guilty parties there. But how are they to do their job and do all these arrests and prosecutions when the Department of Justice is bogged down with all this ICE stuff? Okay, they got to do all these, they got to investigate this, they got to have court proceedings, they got to deal with judges and all this. How is it the Department of Justice is to make all these arrests and do these investigations involving voter fraud, the Minneapolis fraud, Epstein, and all of that, if they're bogged down with all this ICE and agitator nonsense? See, that's it right there. They're trying to bog down the DOJ so that they can't investigate and make the arrests in these appropriate cases, such as the voter fraud, Minneapolis fraud, and everything else, the Epstein files, and just everything else that is going on. They can't do that if they are bogged down continuously with case after 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 case involving ICE confrontations with agitators. Okay? And nobody is talking about this. I have yet to hear anybody talk about this. And I'm honestly surprised because, again, I didn't think about this till this morning until I found these articles. And I'm going to show you the articles that I am talking about here. Okay? Check this out. Sorry, hit the wrong button. Okay. At least 7 more federal prosecutors quit in Minnesota after DOJ's lack of investigation into agents who shot Renee Good. Okay, again, prioritizing cases. We actually had one DOJ prosecutor deliberately have herself held in contempt of court so that she could take some time off and get some sleep, because she has been bombarded with 88 cases of involving this whole thing with ICE and these subsequent investigations involving these agitators. Let's go ahead and check out this article directly here. Let's go ahead and play the file.
Big Trump fans makes me feel it's pretty unusual, but nobody knows when they saw the gun, how they saw the gun, everything else. Bottom line, it was terrible. Both of them were terrible. The other was terrible too. And I'm not sure about his parents, but I know her parents were big Trump fans. Makes me feel bad anyway. But I mean, I guess you could say even worse. They were tremendous Trump people, Trump fans. And, you know, the daughter was, she was, I don't know if you could say radicalized, maybe not. I don't know. But I hate to see it. I hate to see that.
Okay. Now let's go into the article itself. at least 7 more federal prosecutors in Minnesota have quit or intend to quit after a wave of U.S. attorneys in the state resigned over the Department of Justice's reluctance to investigate immigration and customs enforcement agent who fatally shot Renee Good, according to recent reports. Again, pretty cut and dry. You have numerous video footage showing that she accelerated towards the agent and struck him with her car, which authorizes the use of lethal force. Now, again, he could have chose to just shoot out her tires if he even shot at all, but having had a vehicle accelerate at him and subsequently strike him, regardless of whether or not he could have dove out of the way or avoided it or should have not walked in front of the vehicle, is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is he was in front of the vehicle, even though that was his own stupidity. Renee Good did accelerate her vehicle towards him. She did hit him, which authorizes the use of lethal force. Okay? It doesn't require a lot of investigation and an understanding of the law to sit there and go, okay, this is how it played out. This is what the law says. Okay, we could sit there and argue that all day. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that, again, they're just being demanded to be bogged down with these investigations that are, for the most part, pretty well cut and dry. Now, there are some instances where the agents are at fault, and there are other instances where agents are not at fault. Renee Good, the agent, was not at fault. He was authorized in the use of lethal force. Alex Preddy, that's a little less cut and dry. A lot of people say that he was reaching for his holster even though he was disarmed, suggesting that he might have had a concealed weapon on his person. Somebody shouted gun in the confusion, and which resulted in gunfire erupting. So that does warrant a little more scrutiny and a little more investigation on the matter. But to be endlessly bogged down so that you can't do your job and investigate these other things, such as the fraud and the Epstein files and all this, I can't really say that I blame a lot of these prosecutors for stepping down. It says, local outlet Care 11 reported the new resignation Monday, naming Dan Bobier, Alan Slaughter, and Anna Voss as some of the prosecutors who parted ways with the DOJ. It is unclear what led to the second wave of resignations. Again, I just pointed that out. Bombardment. When the Independent reached out to the DOJ for comment, it referred to a February 2025 memo from Attorney General Spam Bundy that read, "It is the job of an attorney privileged to serve in the Department of Justice to zealously defend the interests of the United States. Those interests and the overall policies of the United States are set by the nation's chief executive, who is vested by the Constitution with all exclusive powers." And so basically, it's freedom of choice. You have a choice as to whether or not you want to take that designation. The new resignations come weeks after the New York Times reported that 6 Minnesota federal prosecutors, including Joseph Thomas, resigned over DOJ's lack of investigation into ICE officer Jonathan Ross, who killed Good in Minneapolis. Again, it's pretty well cut and dry. She accelerated her vehicle at ICE agents. She struck the agent with her vehicle, which authorized the use of lethal force. Okay, that is assault. That is vehicular assault assault with a deadly weapon, and assault on a federal officer, all of which warrant and justify the use of lethal force. Now, could he have shot her tires out or not shot at all? Yes, that's officer's discretion, but by law, by definition of law, the use of lethal force was authorized and he used it. Okay, it's cut and dry. You don't need to sit there and investigate it and reinvestigate 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 until hell freezes over. Okay, it's fucking ridiculous. And now they just want to get into the dynamics of that. Okay, another interesting article here. Judge wipes away order requiring feds to preserve evidence gathered at Alex Pretty shooting. Again, this is something that's interesting because the judges, it would seem, would be pretty well gung-ho to investigate this. Hell, I'm keen to investigate this because it's not as cut and dry as the Renee Good thing. So, for anybody accusing me of being biased here, suck a fart out of my ass. Okay, a Minnesota judge has wiped away an order he issued last month that required federal investigators to preserve evidence gathered at the scene of Alex Pretty's fatal shooting by immigration officers. U.S. District Judge Eric Tostrad, hope I pronounced that right, said he was lifting the emergency order he issued the day of Pretty's shooting that barred various federal investigatory offices from destroying or altering any evidence related to the incident because he had gotten assurance from federal officers that evidence would be properly maintained. Okay, that's a good act of faith there. That's good mutual cooperation. Okay, I can roll with that. Let's, it's kind of opening the floodgates for potential misuse there, but hopefully everybody does things the proper way and doesn't try to pull some shady shit. The judge, an appointee of President Donald Trump, has imposed the requirements that at the behest of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, after they raised concerns in court that their own investigative efforts into the incident could be undermined absent his investigation. Though the record is not one-sided, the greater weight of the evidence shows defendants are not likely to destroy or improperly alter evidence related to Mr. Pretty's shooting during the life of this case and other relevant considerations, and do not, on balance, favor a continuing preservation order. Okay, so in hindsight, if federal agents at the DOJ were found to be destroying evidence or impeding an investigation, okay, that's interference with the federal investigation and evidence tampering. By law, they can and should rightfully be prosecuted. So you effectively don't need an additional order in that regard. Because the law is already on the books. Okay, you don't tamper with evidence. If you do, you go to jail. Okay, so you don't need an order to reinforce that because the law itself reinforces itself. So that's actually a fairly interesting read, and I can agree with that. No argument from the peanut gallery here. But again, I think a lot of this has to do with what's going on with all these subsequent investigations with the election fraud, Minnesota fraud, fraud in other areas, the Epstein files. In fact, people are now talking more about the Anthony Weiner laptop and wanting the information that the FBI and DOJ had gotten from that during those previous administrations, during those subsequent investigations. You have Hillary Clinton, who is now agreeing to testify in regards to the Epstein case, though her initial refusal to adhere to a congressional subpoena should have warranted in her immediate arrest. Again, I am sick of this political bias. You know, if I was ordered to show up to court to testify and I didn't, I'd have cops at my house within an hour of those proceedings arresting my ass. But yet, nobody touches these politicians. What the actual fuck? Like, seriously? Whatever is allowing for these get out of jail free cards for these goddamn politicians needs to be repealed. Seriously, an executive order needs to be signed that allows for this political immunity, even in political cases and investigations. It's ridiculous. Okay, the law needs to be the same for everybody. Okay, the rules need to be the same for everybody. Okay, just because you're a goddamn politician or you have fucking money, okay, justice should be equal and fair. Okay, and we need to get back to that. There needs to be executive orders and legislation passed that makes the playing field level again. Okay, these people should not get special fucking treatment. And I'm fucking sick of it. Anyway, I don't know what more to really add to this. I think we pretty well covered every aspect of this whole thing that we possibly can. Again, I would say a lot of this is distraction and, you know, keeping people busy and distracted from investigating everything else. I mean, you have the Epstein files that dropped this over the weekend, over 3 million files that got dropped on that. There's a lot that people need to comb through, a lot that needs to be investigated. There needs to be criminal indictments, obviously. And I think a lot of what's happening here and attempting to bog down the Department of Justice with these subsequent ICE investigations is an attempt to keep them busy so that nobody can address the Epstein files and the fraud and all of that. And also, you've got Nicolas Maduro. What the hell is going on with Nicolas Maduro? The United States went in there and extracted him in a short, sweet, and to the point military operation. But ever since the Somali thing came out and the subsequent shit with ICE, again, it just seems like a distraction. We don't hear jack fucking shit about Nicolas Maduro. Donald Trump, what's going on with Nicolas Maduro? Alex Jones, if you're watching this, bro, start harping on this. Talk about this. Get on Trump's butt. Do you say you have Trump's ear? Get in his ear and go, hey, what's going on with Nicolas Maduro? Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he going to testify? Is he going to go on record talking about the who, what, where, when, and why involving all this election fraud and everything else that was going on? Come on. You know, this is part of it. This is all part of the big thing. He knows, Nicolas Maduro knows the key players. And if we're going to move forward with the fraud investigations and the Epstein investigations and prosecutions in all this, I think maybe Nicolas Maduro might be a key witness, and his testimony might prove extremely valuable, especially considering most of this shit with the money laundering and the fraud and the voter fraud and everything else was being run through Venezuela. Okay, he was the front man. He knows all these people. He's got the names. He's got the list. He's got all the details. So I want to see something coming from this, and I want to know what's going on with this, if anything at all. And if nothing's going on, that I want and I demand that something start happening. Okay, we didn't just off the guy like we did bin Laden or Saddam Hussein. Okay, we extracted the guy. He's sitting in a prison cell right now. I want to know what this guy knows. I want things moving forward with this guy. I want to know what's going on with Maduro. I want to know what the hell you plan to do with Maduro. I want to see what he knows. I want to see criminal prosecutions in conjunction with what he knows, in conjunction with the Epstein files and the voter fraud and the money laundering and all of that. I want to see all this come to a head. I want to see prosecutions. I don't just want to see indictments that go nowhere. I want criminal prosecutions that are seen all the way through. Okay, prosecution, conviction, sentencing, sentence carried out, the whole shebang. Okay, start to finish, from indictment to sentence carried out. I want to see it. Okay, and I think the American people want to see it. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and put the turkey in the oven. So, going back to the media, I didn't even play my intro music. Shame on me. Yeah, that's just how important this stuff is. Get some military background music here. Distractions to bombard DHS and the DOJ and Homeland Security and all of that with nonsense, okay? The Epstein files need to be investigated. There needs to be prosecution, same with the voter fraud and the money laundering and everything else. There needs to be criminal prosecutions that are seen all the way through to convictions and sentences carried out. No ifs, ands, or buts. The American people are pissed, and they're ready to take, and many of them are stating that they're about ready to start taking matters into their own hands if shit doesn't start getting done. Now, I'm not advocating for violence. I'm just simply reporting on the facts and begging the Trump administration to listen to the American people and start getting shit done adequately. And if that means you gotta fire Spam Bundy and Todd Blanche and all these other corrupt motherfuckers that are around you and get back to being the Trump from The Apprentice that we thought we were getting, then so be it. Get back to being that version of Trump and start putting boots to asses and getting shit done before the American people get pissed off and take matters into their own hands, God forbid. So let's just try to handle things the right way. And on that note, again, I'm putting the turkey in the oven. So if you have liked this broadcast, share the retransmissions, follow us on our various social medias, X, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, all at Real TWBRN. Check out our online store and get your No Strings protest shirts, your ICE shirts, and all of your other TWBRN merchandise at realtwbRN.printify.me. I almost forgot what it was for a minute. And support the broadcast. And by all means, keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts and opinions. And until next time, I'm Chris Sheldon, the Tin Man with the Worldwide Resistance Network. If you're watching this, you are the resistance. Take care, stay warm, God bless.